Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, inconclusive elections have become sort of a new wave in the Nigerian elections. The Kogi bias experience a vivid example of such. The inconclusive elections came in the few months of the new chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu's assumption of office. But that's not the first time we've seen that scenario play out. But the man now at the helm of affairs is seeking ways of stopping that trend. And beyond that, he wants some more permanent means of curbing violence and election malpractices. Today in Lagos, I sat down with the INEC chairman where he spoke to us about a series of issues from inconclusive elections to the issues of violence and electoral reforms.
There are 2 or 3 inconclusive elections out of about 50 elections. So far we have conducted 50 elections. But I think there is an explanation for this. What is an inconclusive election? It's an election in which on the first ballot, the margin of lead is less than the margin of cancellations. And sections 26 and 53 of the Electoral Act are very clear as to what to do in the event of violence, threat of violence, or natural disaster, or where there is overvoting in a particular polling unit, and the outcome is likely to change the overall result of the election. In which case, the Electoral Act said that INEC should declare the election null and void and appoint another time for the election. So where the election is not conclusive on first ballot, the Act also defines what we should do to conclude the election. That is what we have applied. For instance, we have analyzed all the inconclusive elections, a handful of them, and they in all cases occurred where there was violence or disruption of the process. Where we had no violence or disruption of the process, the election was inconclusive. Now, elections are becoming better in Nigeria. There is no doubt about it. Since the introduction of technology in the 2015 general election, that's one. Secondly, we have strong political parties fielding strong candidates in the elections. The stakes are now even higher. For that reason, you don't have the situation that we used to have before, where you have one large party and smaller parties leading to landslide victory in elections. The era of landslide in our elections is gone for good.
Do you think that our electoral process is too expensive to run?
4 personnel are deployed on election duty to each polling unit in the country. The international best practice prescribes 6 to 10 election duty officials per polling unit. We operate at the level of 4. By the time we get to 6 per polling unit in line with international best practice, the cost will certainly go higher. But I also realize that in countries where they have between 6 and 10 personnel per polling unit, most of the election duty staff are volunteers, just working for God and country. So if we are going to have volunteers in Nigeria, and it's also, I understand the constraint under our own system, it will cut the cost of election by up to 80%. But secondly, the other cost of running elections in this country, or the cost to the election management body, is litigation. At the end of the last general election, there were 680 cases in court, and in each one of them, INEC was represented, and we hired lawyers and we paid the lawyers. And similarly, we also have litigation arising from pre-election matters, not even election matters. Some may be party issues, and in each and every case, INEC is joined. And we had to hire lawyers to defend us. So it adds to the cost of the election. I'm running elections in this country as well. So there are ways by which we can minimize the cost of election. In some countries, as I said, there are volunteers who help with election day duty. And in other cases, they don't have as much litigation as we do. So it helps to reduce the cost of election. Are these options in our own peculiar jurisdiction? No, they are not options that we are considering immediately. Every election duty staff in Nigeria is remunerated. And for that reason, it adds to the cost of election. So if you look at the budget, it's big. But at the end of the day, 80% of it, over 80% in fact, goes to allowances of election day staff, the ad hoc staff we engage, the collation officers, returning officers, the supervisors, the monitors, and transportation and other logistics of conducting election. The country is huge.
Electoral reforms. There's the Lemon report, there is Justice Iwe's committee report. How far reaching do you think these reports will help, and how can we incorporate them?
They are far-reaching reports, but there is one area covered by both the West and Lemu reports that I would like to address. Lemu committee made a similar recommendation to the West committee, and the report of the Lemu committee was accepted by the government of the day. A white paper issued. The Attorney General at the time directed by the white paper to take steps to establish the Electoral Offences Tribunal. It requires the amendment of the Electoral Act that has not been done. So what we are doing now is to work very closely with the two committees on INEC at the National Assembly, House and Senate, to see if we can revisit particularly the West and Lemu reports on that aspect of their recommendations, believing also that we need to nip in the bud the rising trend of electoral violence.
That's an interview there with the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, talking to China's television. But we take a moment, and when we return, like a family affair, they always call it, anyways, in the PDP, foes have become friends. As Southwest PDP leaders meet to agree on the region's agenda ahead of the national convention. That's next. Join us again.